Hi, I'm Rachel from the Wheaton Public Library, and welcome to the American Library Association's International Games Week. This is a week where we get to celebrate games, board games, video games, games you make up yourself, games you have at home, games you play by yourself, games you can play with other people. It's so fantastic to play games together. And especially during these times, what's better than grabbing out a board game or a deck of cards and playing something new? So, this video is going to talk about designing your own board game, some things to consider when you're getting started. What do you need? What type of pieces should you use? What's the end goal of your game? Just to get your brain going, to get you thinking about all the different things that you can do when you're creating your own board game. So I want to share some tips and tricks as you get started with your own game, and hopefully this will help you create a game that you can play with your friends and your family, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Here are some tips and tricks in designing your very own board game. These are in no particular order. My first suggestion is to play lots of games. Get to know what games you like, what games you don't like, what you want to include in a game, what you don't want to include. It gives you a lot of great ideas based on what is already out there and what people have thought of. The next thing to think about is what will be the theme of your game. Is it based on a favorite book or movie? Is it just completely from your imagination? Is it from something you see in real life, or an interest of yours, underwater life or the desert, anything like that? Think about what you want to tie your whole game together. What is your theme going to be? And then you're actually going to be designing your board game. What are you going to use for your board? You can start with a blank piece of paper. I recommend cardstock or a thicker paper. And if you want to, you can either glue it to a box or to a piece of cardboard, something that'll make it sturdy so that it'll have a nice long life to it. You can design your own board. You can draw your own squares or swirls or circles. You can design it however you want, or there are lots of great templates out there. So if you want to start with an established board, you can then create the rules for that board. This one has a start and a finish. It has some free spaces on it, and the squares are numbered. Maybe that's something that you're going to be looking for in your game. Maybe you're going to be looking for a template that's even more filled in or less filled in. Another thing to consider is how your players are going to get around the board. What are they going to be using? Is it a spinner? These are spinners that we bought online, and we just cut out a circle, and then you can draw numbers or letters on your spinner depending on the different spaces that you have in your game. Maybe they have to roll a dice to find out how many spaces they move. Or maybe they pick a card from the middle of the board, and that tells them what space to go to, or how many spaces to move, or what color space to move to. So how are your players going to get around the board? And what will your players look like? You could borrow pieces from other games that you might have, or you can create or find your own. You might use Legos, and each player gets a Lego, a different color, to help them move around the board. Maybe you have toys that fit the theme of your game. So if you were doing an underwater game, maybe you have some sea creatures, marine life that you want to use for that. Maybe you went to the beach and you've got some shells laying around the house. Or other little craft pieces. This is a little foam creature. Maybe you want to design your own pieces. I've seen some where people have taken pictures of their family members and cut those out and made those into the plain pieces. Maybe you want to use clay. If you use an air dry clay or a clay that you can bake in the oven, you can create your own little characters to move around the board. Now that you have the theme of your game, you want to make sure that people can actually play your game. So rules are very important. It's always smart to start simple, and then you can add some more complicated rules, but you want to make sure that after reading the rules, your players are able to play the game and that they still want to play it. So think about what you're going to include in your rules. What is the end goal of the game? How do people move? What do you need to play? And you can use games that you already have and take a look at the rules. How do they tell you step by step what to do? How do they tell you special rules so you can always look through and see what they suggest? If you have to keep score, do you have a piece of paper for people to keep score? How many points do people get? How do you win the game? All very important things to think about as you are playing the game. The last piece of advice I'll give is to practice your game. As you are building it, take a break and try it out. Have a family member try it out and see if they can figure out what's going on. Maybe they have questions for you, and that'll help you determine what you need to include in your rules. Does something not make sense to somebody? Are there conflicting rules and you want to make sure that that all gets ironed out? So practice your game and have other people help you practice playing it to make sure that everything goes smoothly. We hope you enjoy building your own board game. If you happen to create one, we'd love to see what you're doing. Feel free to share that to the Youth Services email, which is youthservices@wheatonlibrary.org. Or if you're sharing on social media, tag us, and we'd love to see the games that you create during International Games Week. Happy game designing!